With the NFL draft behind us, it is time to turn our attention back to our rookie tiers. This time, we're covering our wide receivers and giving our final updates for what you should do heading into rookie drafts. So let's dive right in. Tier 1. This maybe shouldn't be a tier of his own type of guy, but for me, he is. It's JSN, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Obviously, he goes in the first round, the first wide receiver off the board to the Seattle Seahawks. At first glance, it's not the world's greatest landing spot for the sole reason of, right, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are there this season. But if you look past just 2023, JSN has a ton of opportunity in front of him. Tyler Lockett is aging. DK Metcalf, at least from a fantasy perspective, has not really lived up to the hype outside of his one top 10 season. JSN really does have an opportunity to be the best wide receiver on this team over the next couple of seasons. He brings a skill set to the Seahawks that they just haven't had over the last couple of seasons, right? He's going to be, or at least profiles to be, one of the dominant wide receivers out of the slot from day one. And while they haven't run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets, JSN likely should change that. His ability out of the slot is unparalleled. It is Keenan Allen. It is Amon-Ra St. Brown. It can be Cooper Kupp. He is agile. He is quick. His short burst, all of these types of things are what make him such an absolute terror to cover. And when you mix his ability with the draft capital invested, it's really difficult to see how JSN just does not absolutely dominate at the next level. My clear-cut wide receiver 1 for this class. Now, turning to tier 2, there's a couple of players in this tier, and for me, at the top, it is Jordan Addison. My wide receiver 2 entering the draft, my wide receiver 2 leaving the draft. And honestly, I think he might have the best year 1 landing spot of any wide receiver taken right in the first round. Between him, Johnston, JSN, and Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison is the only one with a clear path to being the wide receiver 2 on his team. And Jordan Addison, while he didn't necessarily wow us his final season in college, he still profiles as an above-average athlete, now tied to a very good quarterback in Kirk Cousins for at least 2023. And he's not really going to get doubled because what are you going to do? Not double Justin Jefferson? It's really difficult to see how Jordan Addison doesn't lead all of these rookie wide receivers in points, at least in year 1. Next on the list, my wide receiver 3 pre-draft is also my wide receiver 3 post-draft. For me, that is Zay Flowers, who also goes in the first round, this time to Baltimore. I honestly don't have a ton of concerns, even with him coming out as a senior. I think his route running, his ability to get open pretty much whenever he wants, his ability to play all 3 positions at wide receiver are what make him such a good pick, right, in the middle of the first for not only Baltimore, but at the end of the first in your rookie drafts. Not only does he have a great analytical profile, aside from being a senior declare, he's now tied to Lamar Jackson long term. And when you look at this wide receiver core, OBJ, I don't anticipate being a long-term threat. Rashad Bateman, who I like and I have talked about several times on this channel, there are still enough questions that he could be the wide receiver 2 behind Zay Flowers, as early as 2024. Zay Flowers has a chance, or at least a path, to being the number 1 overall wide receiver for Lamar Jackson in an offense that is no longer stuck with Greg Roman. Todd Monken is going to have this team throwing the ball significantly more. Zay Flowers, that pick should signal a change in philosophy. And just long term, again, Lamar's there now. We know who his quarterback will be for at least the next 3 to 4 seasons. I am all in on Zay Flowers. Now to my wide receiver 4. It is Quentin Johnston. And honestly, Quentin Johnston jumped up a tier for me after the NFL draft. He used to be down in tier 3 with guys like Josh Downs, who went in the 3rd round. Clearly, I was off. I was wrong. I'm fine to adjust. Quentin Johnston jumps to my wide receiver 4 spot in the tier 2. But the reason he's not above Addison or Zay Flowers is I really think Quentin Johnston has the lowest floor of any of these wide receivers. He's just an all-around massive boom or bust prospect. I don't really know how else to phrase that. He has all of the athletic tools. It is very obvious he is a size, speed freak of nature. He's now paired with Justin Herbert, which is as good a landing spot as you can get. Maybe not year 1 with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams there, but year 2 and beyond, he should have a massive role tied to, again, what could be or should be an elite quarterback for the next decade. On the flip side, he didn't put together monster seasons in the Big 12, which you typically see because the defense is a joke there. He has work to do as a route runner. He really needs to develop overall as a wide receiver, and I think that's the biggest question, where I think Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers are guys that can go in, compete, and not necessarily be elite, but be very good from day one. Quentin Johnston needs to get coached up. So for me, I'm going to take the risk and just put him at the end of this tier, but he still should be one of the top 4 wide receivers off the board, basically without question. There's nobody else that could even challenge him as like a wide receiver 4 in this class. Moving to tier 3, we are on to my wide receiver 5. I just mentioned him a minute ago. It is Josh Downs, and Josh Downs still as a player, right, from an analytical sense, has just a rock solid profile. He's an early declare. He had a 38.7% target share his sophomore year in college with Sam Howell. He has a year 2 breakout age, and he's just an all-around phenomenal route runner. And yes, he may profile more in the slot than on the outside, but I don't know if it really matters all that much for Josh Downs, at least from a floor perspective. The ceiling is going to be capped if you're not playing on the outside. We get that. That's why Josh Downs, right, falls to the 3rd. He's in tier 3. But even for a slot and being a smaller guy, right, he came away with a 72% contested catch rate. So he just, I think, plays bigger than his actual size, and hopefully that translates to him getting some snaps on the outside. And when you look at landing spot, right, with Anthony Richardson alongside Michael Pittman, and I guess if you want to consider Alec Pierce as well, I don't think he necessarily lands in a bad spot, but it's certainly not going to be a high volume role. Year 1, I don't have high hopes. I don't have high expectations. Anthony Richardson is going to be coming along. Michael Pittman earns targets at an insane clip, right? 25% at least the last 2 seasons. It will be an uphill battle for him to have value year 1. I still like Josh Downs long term. If Anthony Richardson can develop with Shane Steichen, who has proven to develop quarterbacks, I think, over the last couple of seasons here, Josh Downs could be a sneaky pick at the beginning or the middle of the 2nd round of your rookie drafts. Now to my wide receiver 6, it is Marvin Mims, and Marvin Mims goes round 2 to Denver, and he gets a tier bump for me, right? He was originally sitting down in tier 4. I didn't anticipate round 2 draft capital. He gets it. It is enough of a reason to move him up here. And when you look at Marvin Mims, right, he has the 4.3 speed. He's 5'11", 183. Fine, not great. And he doesn't have a ton of college production, right? At least not from a volume perspective. He's put up yards. He is a freak of nature after the catch, but he was never able to earn a super high target share in college. And honestly, that's fine. I think the role he plays in Denver is one they've been seriously missing. They have not had the speed that Marvin Mims has. At least they haven't had it healthy, right? They hoped it was going to be KJ Hamler. Marvin Mims basically should be the automatic replacement for KJ Hamler. Does he ever develop into a true wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 for fantasy? I'm not 100% sure. Just like I'm still not 100% sure with Josh Downs. I think they're both good players, but the ceiling's going to be capped most likely. So again, tier 3, the drop-off is steep in this wide receiver class. We knew this coming in. And Marvin Mims, while he is rising up my rookie ranks, I'm still not 100% in to say he's going to be a smash player at the next level. Now, our final player in this tier, it is a wide receiver out of Tennessee, but it's not Jalin Hyatt. For me, it is Cedric Tillman. And Cedric Tillman has a weird profile, in all honesty, right? 5th-year player. He's 6'3", 213, has been dealt with injuries, didn't have elite production early in college. There's just a lot going on with Cedric Tillman. But his last 2 seasons, at least prior to getting hurt, it looks like he was starting to put everything together. Right? He goes over 1,000 yards, and I think he probably would have easily eclipsed it if he doesn't get hurt in year 5, which is just insane to say, but in year 5. Now he lands in Cleveland. He goes 3rd round, which is what you want to see. Being tied to Deshaun Watson, with your biggest competition being Amari Cooper on the outside, who still not necessarily old, but getting older. You have Elijah Moore, who they just traded for. I think Cedric Tillman is going to be a developmental player, which is, again, odd considering he's a 5th-year guy. But if he can learn the nuance that Amari Cooper plays with, I think Cedric Tillman could turn into a very good player. So Cedric Tillman, I think, is a high upside player. There's not a lot of them in this class, just because his size lends to a dominant outside player. If he gets there, we don't really know. But a guy I'd love to take a shot on at the end of the 2nd, early 3rd in rookie drafts. Now to tier 4. Let's kick it off. It's the other Tennessee wide receiver, Jalin Hyatt. I have been Cedric Tillman over Jalin Hyatt for a little while. And honestly, Jalin Hyatt falls out of tier 3 for me because I thought he was going to get day 2 draft capital. And the reason he's not in tier 3 but Cedric Tillman is I think Cedric Tillman is just a better wide receiver right now. Jalin Hyatt, while he has speed, is not a polished route runner. He's not a intelligent route runner, right? If you look at his reception perception, He has an insanely low success rate versus zone. Versus man, he's fine, but he's not running a diverse route tree. He's just not. And at his size, his speed, you need to do that at the next level. And this is a guy that had no production year 1 and year 2 in college. Right? He does leave coming off of a freakish season in his junior year. But again, that is with a spread offense, playing tempo. It's not an NFL offense. And we've seen these speed guys. And I think the NFL is starting to catch on, right? We saw it with Henry Ruggs. The Raiders did what the Raiders do and took him super early. We saw it with them do it with Darius Hayward-Bay as well. Now, I'm not saying Jalin Hyatt will be those players, but he very well could be. I think that's who makes the most sense to compare him to. Or like a Ted Ginn as well, who, good player, not a great fantasy asset. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen with Jalin Hyatt on the Giants. It's just not a guy I'm really going to be drafting much of. I've seen people talk about taking him early second, and after him going in round 3, I'm just not getting on board with that, right? Cedric Tillman, who I have a tier above, I'm still taking at the end of the second only. So Jalin Hyatt is just going to be out of my price range. The second wide receiver in this tier then, it ends up being Jayden Reed. Obviously, he gets second round draft capital. He lands in Green Bay, and I think he should immediately find a role on this team, right? They haven't had a good young slot receiver in quite some time. It's basically been Randall Cobb, kind of half-ass running routes. I think that's what we've watched with Aaron Rodgers there. And now you have Jayden Reed, who, again, early breakout in college, year 1 breakout, but has a very, very underwhelming senior season at Michigan State. I think if he comes out junior year, he probably ends up, maybe even higher in the second round here. I think he probably hurt himself just a little bit. But nonetheless, he still goes second round. Now, he doesn't end up much higher in my tiers because I wasn't high on Jayden Reed initially, but after looking at the draft capital, he has to rise. If you just watched our rookie risers video, Jayden Reed is one of the biggest risers on my board just because I expected day 3 draft capital. I did not anticipate round 2. Clearly, Green Bay sees something in him. He's already going to be better than Romeo Doubs, and I think Jayden Reed ends up being the number 2 pass catcher at least from day 1 in this offense. The next guy on the list, it is Jonathan Mingo, who rose up boards late and lands in round 2 with Carolina. And honestly, I don't get it. I will not be a part of the Jonathan Mingo experiment, I think is the best way to put it. Well, yes, he is a freak athlete, right? Coming in 9.8 RAS, relative athletic score. There's just not a lot of other items you can point to that say, Jonathan Mingo is going to be a stud. I think he got pushed up boards because of his size and athleticism, which is just lacking in general in this wide receiver class. And a team reached for him. I think that's what it is, right? He really does not break out in college, a true traditional analytical breakout in college, until year 3. He then becomes a 4th-year player and doesn't do a whole lot with that either. And it's just, I don't get the appeal here. I did a video on him and Jalin Hyatt before the draft saying, look, they're going to go second, third round. I'm not in on the player. I'm not in on the profile. The landing spot is nice. In Carolina, he could be the best wide receiver, but I don't think that's saying a ton alongside a very old Adam Thielen at this point, and DJ Chark, who really hasn't been healthy, hasn't been the same since year 2 in Jacksonville. So Mingo could be the best receiver on this team. I don't know if I'm going to be excited to draft him at any point. I've seen him going late first, early second. And again, like I said in my other video, if I'm not getting him in the 3rd, I'm not taking a chance on Jonathan Mingo. And to close out tier 4, it is another second-round wide receiver, Rashee Rice, going to Kansas City in the middle of the second. Rashee Rice is interesting. He is 6'1", 204, was listed at much bigger, so that was shocking to see during the combine, and looked to be really a developmental pick at the next level. I don't think many people expected him to go in round 2. This very well could be another case of, bigger wide receivers getting pushed up in a small wide receiver class. But with all of that being said, he lands with Kansas City. That is the best location you can land as a wide receiver because you are tied to Patrick Mahomes. Now, Patrick Mahomes will not target you just because you exist on this team. You need to be talented. You need to earn targets. Rashee Rice could do that. Again, it's a very, very weak wide receiver room. He could step in and by the end of the season be the best wide receiver there. Or on the flip side, he could be another Sky Moore and just really not be relevant at all. He is a massive boomer bust prospect, but where you can get him in drafts, right, you can get him in the 3rd round, where I think Jonathan Mingo should be going. And if that's the case, I'm in to take a shot on Rashee Rice at that price. Even late second, I'm fine with. But again, if he gets pushed up much higher, it's, I think, going to be a little difficult to buy in. And then there are two other wide receivers that aren't necessarily in my tiers, but two other guys I want to pull out that are grouped with everybody else for me. One is Tank Dell, obviously. He is tiny. He is like 5'8", 165. He lands with Houston. Houston's wide receiver room is wide open, right? It's Nico Collins, it's John Mechie, it's Xavier Hutchinson, who I like but went too late, so I can't really talk about him anymore. And then you have Tank Dell. Tank Dell could be great, but again, the size is working against him. I think he physically comps really close to Tutu Atwell, which is not ideal. He's probably a little bit of a better route runner. He had better junior year production than Tutu Atwell did. So a name to keep an eye on in your rookie drafts. And the last name is Michael Wilson, who goes in the third round, right? 6'1", 216 out of Stanford. While he's not necessarily an athletic marvel by any stretch of the imagination, right? 66th percentile speed score. He can find a role in this offense this season, right? Let's say DeAndre Hopkins does get moved. Michael Wilson's really the only big-bodied guy they have on the outside. Now, the news of Hopkins potentially not leaving at all probably hurts Michael Wilson. But with him getting day 2 draft capital, you have to take a look at the end of your rookie drafts. He is an interesting dart throw. All right, guys, that is all I have for you. Again, if you like what we're doing here, subscribe to the channel. If you want more of these videos, check out the DLF YouTube membership as well. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.